co-founder of Black Voters Matter. Evan, I want to start with you. Tell me why this case matters, not just to Alabama, but really to the entire South.
Sure, and thank you for having me, Tiffany. Hello, LaTosha. So this case really hinges on the interpretation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Section 2 prohibits a state or a political subdivision of a state from using any standard practice or procedure that results in denial or abridgment of the right of any citizen of the United States to vote on account of race and color. And it also prohibits dilution of voting through the use of redistrict plans that pack or crack communities of color to deny them the ability to constitute a majority in a single district or multiple districts. So basically what that means is here in Alabama, we had a map that diluted Black voter representation in the congressional map. We challenged that map and won at the lower court, at the lower district court in the federal system, which was a unanimous, actually a unanimous verdict. And now that case is going to go before the Supreme Court in October for them to actually review the merits of that lower court's decision to determine really the fate of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act.
So thank you for that, Evan. And LaTosha, you know, when we think about voting rights, I feel guilty saying this to you because I'm exhausted. So I know you must be exhausted, and you're out there on the front lines every day. People aren't really necessarily thinking about redistricting, redrawing the maps and things like that. They're typically thinking about voter suppression actually at polls, but it starts way before then. How can voters navigate that? And given Congress's failure, I feel like people are looking to you to help them navigate that. So thank you. But tell us what to do.
Well, you know, thank you for the question. I think we really need to understand what is happening in this moment right now. Yeah. Even if we go back to the Alabama case, we need to recognize that 27% of the population of the state of Alabama are African Americans. Mm-hmm. They have less than 14% representation on the congressional level, right? And so what you see is a state that has been a very bad actor around voting rights. They have a history of marginalizing voters. And how did that change? That changed when people were organized, came together. When we think about what happened in Selma, Alabama, and the voting rights movement taking place in Alabama, it was actually directly a result of people organizing, saying we've got to do more. We actually got to change the law. And so I think we have to continue to go to the courts and appeal to the courts, but we also have to organize. We have to organize around elections. We have to organize making sure that we're educating people on the issues, but we've got to really be a power. And part of it is we've got to put pressure because there's a concerted effort to marginalize the Black vote and the Black voice in this nation right now.
Yeah, the Black vote, and also, you know, I think about Georgia. And so, Evan, this is a question to you. Listen, in Georgia, there was a multi-ethnic, multi-racial coalition. And while everybody's celebrating the confirmation of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, that would not have happened had the voters of Georgia not confirmed Senators elected Senators Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff. So elections have consequences. So as we are in this midterm cycle, how do you say voters of Alabama can navigate this? Because, again, this casts a wide net of influence across the entire South.
Sure. Well, we definitely invite anybody listening who wants to learn more about how this case impacts their work and their daily lives to go to powerontheline.org. And over the summer and in the fall, really for the next year, we're going to be working with regional allies, national allies, Black Voters Matter, with LaTosha and Cliff, to really make sure that our civic groups across the state and across the country understand the importance of this case. Gerrymandering and redistricting can really appear to be complex sort of inside baseball sort of things. But when we look at what Americans and our neighbors in Alabama are able to figure out, they figure out the NCAA, the SEC tournament process.
Exactly.
They figure out Bitcoin. We figure out things when we know that it's personal to us. And we know that we can help our neighbors understand the importance of this. And this is something, as LaTosha was saying, that requires a movement, a social movement, a cultural
Everybody
movement.
Has to do a little.
People really understand what's on the line.
I want to stick with you, Evan, because, a part of me thinks about this case could potentially backfire. Because if it goes to the Supreme Court and they are able to further dismantle voting rights, particularly Section 2, are you worried about that? Because then we have to remember there's still a 6-3 majority conservative court with not one, not two, but 3 Trump-appointed justices.
Right. Well, we don't proceed from a place of worry when it comes to asserting our rights and asserting our constitutional rights. That was what's happening in this case, and I hope that folks around the country continue to bring these cases and continue to assert their rights. Too many people died for us to have the rights and to have the ability to go into court and to file these claims in the first place. And if we have an adverse ruling, that's really where the power of a broad-based cultural movement comes in. And that's not a place we've been here before historically. After the Civil Rights Act of 1875, there was particularly devastating reaction against the gains of Reconstruction, and yet
absolutely.
our movements continue to push forward, and that's what we'll have to do here. If we can't, if we have something that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, but I think the bigger issue of this case, LaTosha, is, I always say the South is only red until it ain't. They can bleed us by 1,000 cuts, but, try to shut us down. We buy a rather round. We're still in this, So just, if you can, because you always bring a word to the Cross Connection family, people are tired. They're exhausted. They're worried about, post-pandemic paying their mortgage. Like, what is the inspiration for people to realize elections have consequences, and if the Republicans take back Congress, it's going to directly impact their life?
Oh, absolutely. And we need to understand the implications of this case in particular. As we're seeing voter suppression in the many forms that is taking place right now, I do want to remind people that in Alabama, in Selma, Alabama, there were 600 people that were on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Only 600 people. They knew that they didn't have government on their side. They knew that they were going to be met with resistance from the local law enforcement, right? But they also knew that they stood on the side of righteousness and they stood on the side of democracy. They organized themselves. They took their fight to the courts. They took their fight to the streets. They took their fights to the polls, and we've got to do the same thing. We've got to demand federal legislation in this moment. We can't back away. We've got to lean in even greater in this moment. We have to organize on the state level, and we've actually got to educate people around if democracy is to be real in this country, we have to make it be so.
We have to make it be so.
We have to make it
Well,
be
I want to thank you and Cliff for all that you do at Black Voters Matter, because I don't think people realize how much work that LaTosha does at Black Voters Matter. And I want to thank you, Evan Milligan, for being on the front lines of the legal battle of this case, because like I said, it will have implications across the entire South. So shout out to the Deep South and shout out to the Dirty South. Thank you both for being here. Coming up, are we getting closer to forgiving student loan debt forever?